Good morning, everyone. All right, so today I'm feeling a little rough. I have some low back pain, right side, some pinched nerve. So it's a little stiff and tight, definitely affecting pelvic tilt on that right hip, a little bit into rotation, largely with just the footfall of my right leg. That whole leg feels a little dead, and so my low back is kind of like tightening up in order to support it. Irritated it over the weekend, driving to Waco and back, which is about 3 hours in one day, and doing some light jogging on it, searching for my phone. So that was fun. So dealing with a little bit of that, and I have a little bit of an arrhythmia. So going to be going slow today to work those things out. Going to have some focus on foot and hips as much as possible in today's class, but it's going to largely be going slow. So, let's get started. We're going to start in the standing position with some crocodile breath first. So making some nice big C shapes with our hands. Hands are going below the rib cage, above the hip bone in that nice meaty section of the abdominal wall. Index fingers are wrapping around into the front. Thumbs are wrapping around into the low back. I want to get a good grip on the abdominal wall so that I can feel the musculature of the abdominals in the front, the low back muscles in the back, as well as the muscles through the side body. We're going to get a nice inhale in through the nose. And as we inhale, I want to work on inflating that abdominal wall like a balloon or like a crocodile. On the exhale, we're drawing that navel up and in and getting a light, we're cinching in our hands a little bit in order to create resistance so that we can feel that expansion of the balloon in all directions. We'll get a good 5 to 10 nice slow breaths. And my rate of breath can be anywhere from like 3-second count to 8-second count, both inhale and exhale. As you're getting into that breath, start to notice how well does that breath expand. I'm really struggling getting breath into this right side. And I'm going to switch this to the chair. So, from arrhythmia, I'm feeling a little lightheaded. Heart rate definitely kind of going up, so bringing my breath down to a sit. Now, as you're feeling that breath start to expand on the inhale, drawing in on that exhale, start to notice the balance of how well does that breath expand on both sides, the right side and the left side, especially with that side body and the low back musculature. Most people breathe well into the belly, but we struggle, especially when there is pain present. If you have any kind of lower leg, hip leg issue, more than likely that side of your low back is not expanding as well. So the breathing apparatus is going to be a big part of the compensation of why it hurts. So we want to work on that breath in order to get that expansion, but more importantly, to continue to build the neurology of a more expansive breath. If we've lost areas of our breath, we're also losing the neurology to support that breath. So I can feel that my right side low back, very, very tight, not moving as much on my inhale breath. So we'll come back to this at the end of the class, and hopefully that's moving a little bit better. I can feel my heart rate kind of dropping, so I'm going to come back up to the standing position. We can let our arms drop off. We're going to do a little bit of foot mobility, starting with nice wide stance. I want the feet perfectly straight. More than likely that right foot's going to want to turn out a little bit, or the left foot might turn out. Most people, the right foot's going to turn out a little bit more, largely because we have a gas pedal and a brake on our cars. So I want to make sure feet stay straight, kind of pay attention to the feet because that right foot may turn out a little bit. We're going to keep the wedge separate for now. From here, I want to bring one foot slightly forward, and we're going to very lightly lift the heel off the floor. And it only needs to be lifted enough to like slide a piece of paper under that heel. And then I want a little bit of a weight shift over to that front leg. You can only, like 60, 70% of weight. It does not need to be a huge weight shift. From here, I want to really work on spreading those toes and the ball of the foot as wide as you can. And I want to stay grounded through the ball of the pinky toe and the ball of the big toe. So that heel is lightly lifted. From here, we're going to start working on turning that knee in and out. But as I turn that knee in and out, I don't want it to roll the foot. I don't want to lose contact with big toe or ball of pinky toe. So we got to have that spread, downward grounding motion as we're spiraling that knee in and out. And as you're doing this, you should notice as your knee turns out, that heel turns in, and as that knee turns in, the heel is turning out. And what that means is happening at the foot is that foot is wringing out like a washcloth. We're getting all those little joints through the midfoot to kind of slide and glide along each other, mobilizing them. You may get some stretch in the arch of the foot or in the calf. And then we're going to switch and do the same thing on the other side. So again, one foot's a little bit in forward of the other, lightly lifting the heel off the floor and then shifting our weight onto that leg. From here, spread the toes wide, ground through the ball of the big toe, ball of the pinky toe, and then we can start playing with the rotation of that knee. Now, I want to pay attention to how does it feel in the right foot compared to the left foot. My left foot feels stiffer. I don't get a bigger stretch in it, it just feels stiff. And so that's fairly common on my left leg is the leg that tends to hold more tension because my right knee is the one that is unstable after 5 surgeries and no posterior cruciate ligament. My left leg tends to hold more tension to support my right. So once we match this side to the other side, we're going to come back to that first foot. And we're now going to bring in the wedge. So the wedge is going to come at a 45-degree angle underneath the ball of the big toe. I want it so we're going to slide it underneath so it goes the ball of the big toe, the ball of the second toe, and a little bit of the ball of the third toe are on the wedge. And the fourth and fifth are on the floor. And this is just going to create a little bit of a pre-stretch in the arch of the foot. So hopefully you can get it pretty good. So my foot is straight. That wedge is coming in 45 degrees into that big toe line. From here, shifting weight, lightly lifting the knee, spreading the knuckles of the foot and the toes, and coming right back to that rotation through the knee, keeping the balls of the feet grounded. And one thing to kind of be aware of here, the pinky toe is not the ball. The ball of the pinky toe is actually back here a little bit. So if you're coming up to where you got the pinky toe touching, my ball of the big pinky toe is actually off the floor right now. It needs to be about there in order to maintain that contact with the pinky toe, which is why I don't want to lift the heel high, because it's going to lift that ball of the toe off the floor. So now as we're working back and forth through this side, Notice how does it feel through that foot. The wedge should create a little bit more stretchiness, so you might get feel a little bit more in the arch of the foot. And then we'll go ahead and bring it to the other side. Same thing, that foot is straight, wedge is coming in at a 45-degree angle. Shifting our weight, lightly lifting that heel and spreading the ball of the foot, knuckles and toes, and then playing with that spiral action of the knee. Now I'm getting more stretch on the left foot. Definitely stiffer, but I feel a lot more, especially right at the base of the big toe, especially as I go into that internal, pressing into that knee. As well, it's hard on the external as well, especially keeping that big toe loaded. It wants to come off the floor. Stiff foot wants to roll a lot more. It doesn't have the mobility to stay flush, for the knuckles to stay grounded. So I want to keep my range of motion of the knee small enough that I'm maintaining grounded foot. And you may notice one knee you can travel further than the other. That's going to be a significant imbalance. So those are the things we're trying to work to get better balance into the feet. So we're going to go ahead and come all the way down to the floor. Getting into our quadruped position, spreading fingers nice and wide, grounding palms, extending elbows fully. I want to have the toes tucked underneath. We're going to inhale as we go forward, exhale as we sink our hips into our heels. So now I want to get some mobility work into that big toe and into the arch of the foot. Inhale, coming back forward. Exhale. As we feel the weight of our hips in our heels, I want to feel that stretch into the ball of the big toe and into the arch of the foot. It will help to have the heels turned in lightly in order to really isolate that big toe line. The other thing that will help is as you're sitting back hips to heels, imagine you have a tail and you're turning that tail up to the ceiling. So I'm actually tilting my pelvis forward towards the floor as I'm sinking hips to heels. That should elicit a little bit more stretch into the arch of the foot. As you're doing this, notice how does the big toe on the right side feel compared to the left side? One side stiffer, tighter, achier. Is it painful? If it is painful, then I want you to back off. I do not want you to move into pain. After about 5 to 10 reps, we're going to turn the heels out and see if we can get tucked all the way out to the pinky toe. Everything else will be the same. Inhale forward, exhale as we sink our hips to heels. Now I want to feel that stretch through the ball of the outer ball of the outer toes and the outer side of the arch of the foot. Inhale forward, exhale, we're still turning that tail up to the ceiling as we sink back hips to heels. We'll come back up to our starting point. Toes are still tucked. Now I want to come in and back to our breath. Breathing into that crocodile breath. Feel that belly expand on the inhale. Exhale, navel comes into the spine. And we're going to start playing with some elbow spirals. So I want to pay attention, notice elbow pits. We're going to spiral elbow pits as far forward as they can go, feeling the palms grounded to the floor. Then we're spiraling them in like you're turning them towards your feet in the rear and going back and forth. I'm largely just working through the long arm bones. I want to feel that spiral action around the shoulder without getting into movement of the upper back. So as we spiral those elbow pits forward, feel how the shoulder blades kind of lock down onto the upper back. As we spiral them internal, feel how that kind of wants to lift the shoulders, but try not to let them lift. Once we get about 5 to 10, just working that long arm bone spiral, we're now going to start to allow the upper back to move a little bit. As we spiral in, feel those shoulder blades roll over the top of the shoulders, coming up to the ears. We can push into the floor and get this rounded upper back, and you can start to feel that nice stretch in between the shoulder blades. Then as we spiral in, elbows forward, feel the shoulder blades pack down and back as your sternum reaches down to the floor. I want to exhale as we're internally spiraling and pressing. Inhale as you're externally spiraling and shoulder blades are packing. Now we're going to add another component. I want to come back to our starting point, and actually real quick, if you need to take a break on the wrists, roll them out as we're going along, feel free to. I don't want you to overload the wrists. We're going to come back to our starting point, and I want to have those elbow pits spiraled forward and feel those shoulder blades locked down on your upper back. We're going to maintain that position of the shoulders as we get into our pelvic tilts. So now we're isolating just the pelvis. Coming back into our inhale, pelvis is going to turn down to the floor so that we get this big sway in our low back. As we exhale, you're pulling that belly button like you're trying to touch your spine and scoop your tailbone. But we don't want to get this movement into the upper back. So we only want it to move into that low back area. Inhale, pelvis tilts to the floor. Exhale, nice scoop. I pay attention to pain or pinch in that low back. I do not want to move into pain or pinch. If you have some pain or pinch in the low back area, then I want you to find the range of motion that you can do it without going into the pain or into the pinch, which may mean that you're only going a very small range of motion, which is fine. I want to play in the area in which we can do it non-painfully. So right now, I have some sensitivity in my low back. I feel it most. I feel a little bit on scoop. Actually, I have a decent amount of scoop right now. And I feel a little bit of pinch as I go forward. But it's at a level 1 on a scale of 0 to 10. It's not that high. In fact, the work that we did on the feet seems to have already helped loosen up the low back a little bit. If you're able to get more mobility without pain, then we're going to continue to move into it. How much can you feel that belly opening up to the floor? How far forward can you go? How big of a sway in your back can you get without pinch or pain? And then as we scoop, how much can you pull that belly button in and scoop into that low back to feel that stretch? And now I want to combine our arm spirals with our pelvic tilt. So as we'll start with a nice inhale. Elbows are already spiraled forward, belly moves to the floor, big sway in the back. As we exhale, scooping, spiral the elbow pits in so they move towards your feet, pushing into the floor to get that big stretch between the shoulder blades, all the way down into the low back. Inhale, brings the pelvis forward, elbow pits spiral forward, shoulder blades spiral down to pack towards your hips, like you're moving them into your hip pockets. With each one, see if you can move into that full range in each direction a little bit more, again, without going into pain. And the last thing we can add is our head. So as we're exhaling, spiraling, elbows in, scooping, I want to draw the head down, and at this point in the middle, it's like I'm trying to touch my forehead to my tailbone at this imaginary point in the middle at the same time that I'm pushing into the floor. Can you feel your core kind of activate? And then as you inhale, pelvis moves to the floor, elbow pit spiraling forward, head is coming up, looking forward at the wall in front of you. Good. So now we're going to go ahead and shift into our shin box position. I'm starting out in my left side shin box. Left knee is forward, left hand's coming down to the ground, nice grounded palm. I want that elbow spiral that we just did, I want to have that same action in the hand that is grounded. So I'm turning that elbow pit out, so it's turning out and away. Feel that shoulder blade slide down like it's packing towards that back hip. Sternum is lifting tall, nice tall spine. We're going to start with just some knee openers, focusing on this back leg. Nice inhale. As we inhale, on our exhale, we're drawing our navel up and in at the same time as we're slowly lifting that knee up off the floor. Inhale, bringing it back down. Now, as I move that knee, I don't want to move my shoulders. I don't want my shoulders to rotate as I move it. I want to be locked in, spiraled, solid on this shoulder. I'm moving this leg without moving the rest of my body. That might make that hip feel a little stiffer, and that's okay. I want to isolate that hip. That's the purpose of holding these other positions. And with each one, we'll start with just 5 reps on this. Each one we're just kind of lightly exploring. We're going to come back and do a second round of these. Once you've done 5, we'll do a slow windshield wiper across to the other side. Ground that palm, spiral the elbow out. Feel that shoulder blade pack down and back, tall spine. Again, locked in upper body, focusing on that back hip, back knee. Nice inhale into our crocodile breath. Exhale as we slowly open that hip or that knee up. This hip is tighter on me. It's actually a little uncomfortable. Scale on the level 1 on a scale of 0 to 10. And it's more just a tightness discomfort. So generally my left hip is tight related to my right low back. That is a common pattern on my body. So after 5, we have a pretty good assessment. My left hip is not moving as well as my right hip. More than likely you felt something, one hip either went higher or felt tighter than the other hip. That's a good assessment point. We're coming back to the first side, and we're going to do it again, but this time we're going to see if we can get a little bit more, we're going to try to squeeze a little bit more range of motion out of it. So grounded hand, spiraled elbow, packed shoulder, tall spine. Nice inhale on the exhale, opening up, squeezing into that movement. Inhale, back down. And just from doing it a second time around, I got a decent amount more mobility in my right hip. It feels a little bit freer and I'm able to come up a little higher. And we can do 5 up to 10 reps. I think because my right hip is moving freer, I'm sticking with 5, and I'm going to come to the left side. Grounded palm, spiraled elbow, packed shoulder. Nice inhale, exhale, lift. So it's still tighter, but I do have more range on the second time around than I did the first time. I'd say the slight discomfort of that tension in the hip, it's still there, but I don't feel it until I get significantly higher. And since it's below that level 3, I'm moving into it slowly, softly, safely, not forcing it. I actually got a little pop on that one, so doesn't hurt, feels good, and the more reps I'm applying, I'm getting a little bit more range of motion out of it. Again, I don't want to force it. So we can stick with like 5 to 10 reps, starting to actually get a little fatigued. So I'm going to move to the other side. If you start to feel fatigue on the weaker or more challenged side, that's a good time to move off of it. Go work on another area, and then you can come back to it later. Fatigue is going to be an indication that your neurology is going to break down, and so form will break down. So I don't want to force repetition when we get to a state of fatigue. So left side, we're now moving to deeper into the hip, still grounded through that palm, spiraled elbow, packed shoulder. Inhaling. Actually, real quick, I'm checking in. Arrhythmia has now, I'm pretty sure it's gone. So something we've done so far has already helped with that. Focusing on this back hip. So as we inhale, actually first, I want to shift our weight a little bit more forward to our front leg so that that back hip is completely off the floor to start with. I don't want that back hip touching. I want to explore this range of motion, so I need to have some height off the floor. So from here, on the inhale, I'm reaching that hip, trying to touch the floor with it, but I'm doing so without shifting my weight into it. So I don't want my shoulders to shift back, trying to push that hip down. My shoulders are still locked over my packed shoulder, packed arm. Inhale, I'm reaching that hip to the floor, seeing how close can I get it to the floor. On the exhale, I'm lifting it up, moving it forward, and scooping into it, trying to feel some light stretch through the front of the hip. So inhale, reaching that hip to the floor. Exhale, lifting it up, reaching forward, and scooping into it. Feel that stretch. The more you're able to scoop into it, you'll start to feel that glute tighten up in the rear. Inhale, nice reach. Exhale, active scoop. Once we get 5 of those, we're going to slowly shift to the other side. Grounded palm, spiraled elbow, packed shoulder. Shift weight so that that back hip is off the floor. Inhale, reaching that hip to the floor without shifting our weight into it. Exhale, lifting it up, reaching it forward, and actively scooping that tailbone into it, feeling that stretch through the front of the hip. Inhale, back to that reach to the floor. How does this side feel compared to the other side? I have a lot more tightness and tension. It's harder to get fully into this scoop on my left hip. My reach to the floor, pretty close. That part's not so far off. It's this scoop and bringing it forward that feels tightest. Although as I'm going back and forth on it, it's actually loosening up fairly quickly. It's always a little tighter on the left side than the right side. That is pretty well patterned in, so I don't expect that to go away completely, but I want to get them both into a better balance to the best of my abilities. And that's actually feeling pretty decent. So now we're going to shift back to the other side. We're going to do the same thing, but now we're going to add some rotation through the upper body. So shoulder, hand grounded, elbow spiraled, shoulder packed, tall spine. Inhale, feel that hip reach to the floor. Exhale, scoop. I want to feel that stretch and that active glute. Now we're going to imagine that we're reaching, got a piece of bread, and I want to share that bread with somebody who's right through the arrow of my knee. So I'm spiraling, seeing how far can I get my fingers to extend. Inhale, I'm bringing it all the way back, reaching that hip to the floor. Exhale, lift, scoop, and then reach and rotate. I want to make sure that back hip gets locked in first before we add the rotation. I want the rotation to be drawing that stretch of that hip up and into the spine a little bit. And then we can slowly shift to the other side, doing the same thing. Grounded palm, spiraled elbow, packed shoulder, tall spine, shifted weight forward as we inhale into that back hip. Exhale as we lift and scoop, and then reaching through the arrow of the knee. So I already had the tighter left hip. As I'm adding this rotation, hips feels just as tight, but I have an increase of tightness and tension in my left side low back, which is super interesting because it's my right side back that I have the pinched nerve and I have discomfort and pain. But it's left hip and left side low back, oh, that really feel tight and restricted, especially in rotation. So maybe it's something going on in my left low back that needs to be worked on in order to get some relief in that right side low back. Once we've matched on that side, we're going to slowly come back to the other side. Now we're bringing that hand off the floor, bringing it up and over. Want the forearm flush with the ceiling. We're still inhaling into that back hip, exhaling as we lift and scoop. And as we lock in that scoop, we're now lifting that elbow like we're trying to touch the ceiling. We can also kind of root down through that same side hip. Inhale, softens it up as we drop that hip, reaching it to the floor. Exhale, lift, scoop, and reach. Want to see if we can feel length and stretch through this side body from the back of the shoulder down into that side of the low back area. You might feel it a little bit more to the posterior of the low back, but I'm trying to see if we can angle in and get that direct line straight through the side body. We can then shift to the other side. Again, that hand comes off the floor this time, up and over. Inhaling into that back hip. Exhale as we scoop, locking in, and lift like we're trying to touch the ceiling with that elbow. Inhale, feel that hip drop to the floor. Exhale, lift, scoop, and reach. This side is tighter, both in that hip and a little bit into that side body, low back area on the right side. Although not as much as I was expecting for how my low back is feeling. It actually feels, it's the hip that feels most immobile. Once we kind of match both those sides, come back to the first side, and now we're going to get into our folds. And with folds, I want to go ahead and start moving back and forth, doing just one fold on each side. So I'm in my left side shin box. I want to be exploratory in our folds, so I'm going to give you a lot of range to move. Left side shin box. I can reach straight forward. I can reach through the knee. I can reach behind the knee. I can even reach all the way across the opposite direction and go against the grain of the body. So all of those are useful areas to explore. Whatever you explore on one side, I want you to explore roughly the same thing on the other side. And we're exploring, kind of looking for the juiciness, right? Where does it feel tight and restricted in a juicy way where it's not painful and we're not forcing it, but we're like, oh, that feels like it could use a little bit of work. You can think of it like we're just spraying some WD-40 into some areas to get it to move a little bit better. That's the kind of juiciness I want it to feel like. It's like, ooh, that could use some lubrication. Let's get that area moving better. So as we get a nice fold, nice exhale, hands slide forward, keep the spine tall and long. Inhale, we're bringing it all the way back up. Exhale as we go across to the other side into our inhale. So we're ready for a nice exhale as we fold to the other side. Inhale, coming back up. Add another breath cycle as you transition. Exhale as you reach to the other side. And we're going to do a good number of reps on this. I like this being closer to 10 and 20 reps, especially moving side to side. And keep in mind, we're also exploring, so we can change the angles that we're reaching on each one, just to kind of see where is that extra layer of juiciness. Where do we need to put a little bit more WD-40? And if you find an area that's tight, do a few reps there. See if you can get it to loosen up. Once we've gotten a few good number of like 5 to 10 reps back and forth, I want to start to change our shin box angle. We're going to let that back leg slide open a little bit as we get into our fold. When we come out of our fold, we can let it slide back in, transition to the other side, and do the same thing. Let that leg slide out a little bit. That should change some sense of mobility related to the hips. Excuse me. As I slide that right leg out, it moves pretty freely, does not really put a lot of restriction into my fold. When I come to my right side and I slide that left leg back, I have a lot more tension in this back hip. This hip is much more compressed. It is not as free. And it definitely adds a little bit more stretch to my fold. And with each one, we'll continue to open that back leg up more and more till we get to what looks more like a yoga class pigeon pose. And of course, I'm not overly concerned about that end range pose. As you're going back and forth, notice it where the tightness is different on the right side compared to the left side. You might find that the tightness is more in the hip that reaches back, such as my left hip. You might find that that tightness is more in the glute of the leg that's in front. You might find that both glutes are tight, but they're tight in different areas. One might be tight more to the outside of the hip, one might be tight closer to the sacrum. If you're feeling differences from one side to the other, those are relevant and worth taking note of and bringing that up in consultation with me. Definitely feeling that left hip harder and harder on that. The further closer I get to that pigeon position, that left hip does not want to move quite as freely. All right, we're now going to change positions, getting into our inverted position. Hands are grounded next to our hips. I want to spiral. We're going to start with elbow spirals, similar to what we did in our quadruped. So spiraling those elbows out and away. As we spiral out, we're pressing down to feel the palms ground down into the floor. Shoulder blades pack, sternum lifts tall. And that's our inhale breath. As we exhale, elbows are spiraling in. Shoulder blade starts to round and move up to our ears as we get that nice rounded upper back. Inhale as we spiral out and away, getting nice and tall, pressing down through the palms. Feel those shoulder blades pack as the sternum lifts. And we're going to start to add in the pelvic tilts with this. As we inhale, elbows spiraling out, pelvis is tilting forward. This is where we start to get more sway in our back. As we spiral elbows in, we're exhaling, drawing navel in and scooping actively so that we get more rounding in our low back with that upper back. See if you can feel a nice stretch on your inhale across the chest as we get tall, and see if you can feel a stretch on your exhale. Cross the upper back down into the lower back. Maybe you can feel it all one big stretch together. Notice if there's a difference in how this feels through your groundedness through your right hand and left hand, especially if you have any kind of upper back, shoulder pain, neck pain. You may find that one hand has greater pressure into the floor and you feel like you can, like if there were grapes on the ground, you can squash those grapes with the palm of your hand better than you can on the other side hand. Does the other hand feel disconnected, like it's harder to get pressure into it? That's a good thing to kind of pay attention to on these. On your next exhale, as you inhale getting tall, we're going to stay tall. So with that nice grounded palms, tall spine, we're going to cross our legs at this point if that's comfortable. But I want to maintain the height of our spine and nice downward grounding through the shoulders. And we're going to do some neck mobility, starting with checking our blind spots. Nice inhale, and then as we exhale, looking over our right shoulder, inhale as we come back to center, and exhale as we look over our left shoulder. On this, as I look, I really want to look from the end of my chin. I want to see how much can I get the end of my chin to move over the edge of the shoulder on the right side. And the reason I want to move from that chin is I want to avoid tilting my head and turning from my forehead, which is a different movement than reaching from that chin. The more you reach from that chin, you'll probably feel a little bit deeper stretch down lower in the neck. As you're doing this, how far are you able to get that chin on the right side compared to the left side? Is one side tighter, more restricted? My left side of my neck has more tension kind of right at that end range compared to the right. Right feels fairly free. Left feels tight. We'll come back to our starting position, head forward. Now we're going to get into our light tilt and lift. So from here, I'm lightly tilting my head, letting my ear drop just a little bit towards my shoulder. I don't want a big drop. I want to make sure it's a little drop. But then the opposite ear is lifting up like I'm trying to touch the ceiling, or you can imagine that you got a piece of string that's pulling your ear up. And I want to feel that traction stretch through the side of the neck. As we reach to one side, we're going to inhale, centering our head, tilt to the other side, and lift. As you're lifting that ear, you can also press down through that same side palm as you keep that elbow spiraled out and away. That'll create a little bit more traction. That should accentuate that stretch a little bit more. And again, I want to play in the juiciness. I do not want to force this. If it's tight, I don't want to force that stretch. I want to move right at that point where it feels good and juicy, not overly stretched and overly strained. And this one's a really important one for assessing. My right side feels fairly free. My left side tight and restricted, and I have a very specific line. This is mobilizing through the scalene muscles. Scalene muscles are pain in the asses. They're great muscles, but they tend to get overcompensated for a lot of things. They're neck muscles, they're shoulder muscles, they're also breathing muscles. So when they get tight and restricted, they create problems for all three of those areas, which is part of the reason they can be a big pain in the butt. So I want to notice when I have, like especially on this movement, if that movement isn't as good as it is on the other side, then this is something we want to work on, getting that balance back through the neck. Then last for the neck is we're going to do some shallow neck rolls, letting the chin drop down to the chest. We're going to let the right ear move to the right shoulder lightly. Gaze will come up to the ceiling, and then our left ear to our left shoulder, and then chin back down to chest. And from here, we're going to turn those 4 points into a circle by smoothing it out, making sure we are not moving into pain. I do not want neck mobility to be painful. I prefer that it doesn't even really get beyond a level 1 of slight discomfort. And as we get into it, we can see if we can slowly get a little deeper without increasing the discomfort. Notice where it feels tight and restricted. I definitely feel that same left side line where I was in my scalenes as my head goes to the right. I got a little bit of it on the right side as my head moves to the left, but it's not quite as noticeable, not as pronounced. After we do 5 or so in one direction, we're going to come back to our start, and we're going to start shallow again. Head drops down. Left ear lightly drops to the left shoulder, gaze back to the ceiling, right ear to the right shoulder, and chin to chest, and then slowly smoothing that out. As you feel into the sensitivity, we can slowly work to get it deeper as long as we don't increase that discomfort. So when I move my head in this direction, it is much looser. I can still feel that left side a little bit as I move through the right. But what's interesting is when I go in the other direction, it is louder, especially in that left. So there's something about the direction of my head roll that elicits more stretch on one side than when I move in the other direction. Again, these are interesting and important assessment points. All right, last thing, we're going to do a little bit of baby roll because I want to get some movement into the spine. We're going to come all the way down to our backs. Arms are coming up into a nice Y position. If you find that your shoulders are stiff and don't want to rest on the floor, bring them out a little wider until you feel your elbows rest softly onto the floors. Feet, toes are pointed straight up to the ceiling, and we're pressing down in through the heels. I want about 5 pounds of pressure pushing down into each heel. And I want to keep that weight even. I don't want one heel pushing harder than the other. From here, we're going slow because I want to make sure there's no pain in the back. Take a nice, let's take a few breaths first. Inhale in through the nose, filling up our crocodile breath, feeling that expansion of the abdominal wall on the inhale. Exhale, navel draws all the way into the spine. On the next inhale, as you exhale, you're going to lift your head off the floor and turn your eyes to your right hand, and you're going to move your left hand over and match to your right hand. Your hips are allowed to get lifted off the floor, but keep them in gravity. I don't want to lift them. I want to feel them get lifted. Inhale as we come back down to the floor. Exhale, lift the head, turn the eyes to the left hand, match right hand to left hand. Inhale, coming back, and we're going to go back and forth. Nice and slow. Notice if it's harder to reach in one direction than the other direction. Things to pay attention to are your feet. Are you able to maintain even 5 pounds of pressure as you reach to the left side and the right side? Or do you find that your one foot wants to push harder, or maybe one foot wants to lift up? Those are important assessment points. Do you feel more stretch in your low back, upper back, or shoulders when you're reaching to one side compared to the other side? So coming back to my left, as I reach with my left side, my right low back is the side that has been hurting, but I'm feeling greater stretch reaching with my left hand across my body on that left side low back than I do with my right side. I feel it on the right side, but it is not as pronounced. Again, these are important assessment points, especially when pain is present. We'll come back to our starting point. Now we're going to move through our feet. So I'm lifting one foot off the floor. I want to keep that foot elevated high. I'm going to let that hip, we're rotating the hip so that hip comes off the floor. And then I want to reach and extend my toes as if I'm reaching up onto a shelf. And I'm reaching far enough that it's going to pull my shoulder blade off the floor. Hips off the floor, shoulder blade off the floor. I want to maintain some contact with the back of the hand. Inhale as we bring that all the way back down. Exhale as we lift and reach across to the other side. And as we reach, I really want to point and extend through the ankle, the toes. I'm really trying to reach. I want my toenails to grow further on each side. We're slowly drawing that stretch further and further up the leg. The more you reach and extend, I want to start to counter reach through the arms. So as I reach through that leg, I'm now starting to reach and extend through my fingertips as well. See if you can feel that stretch from toe tip to fingertip as you go side to side. Once we get balanced out, we'll come back to our starting point. We're going to let our feet come flat to the floor. We're going to make our big C shapes out of our hands. Actually, since we did this starting in the standing position and I'd gotten to the seated position, I want to finish where I did my assessment. So I'm bringing out my chair. If you did the assessment standing, I'm going to suggest coming back to our standing position. My arrhythmia is gone, so that feels a lot better. But But I did the bulk of my assessment in the chair, so I'm coming back to my sit. Big C shapes with the hands, thumbs in the back, index fingers in the rear, or in the front, sorry. Nice inhale, feel that abdominal wall expand. In first breath, I have so much more access to breath in this right side. Was not there at all, and I can feel it expand. Exhale, draw that navel in, allow the hands to cinch in a little bit. If anything, I would say my left side low back, it moves, but it actually moves a little bit less than the right side right now. So again, I felt more tightness and tension in that left side, even though the discomfort's on the right side. So now my focus might actually be more on the side that doesn't hurt, which is a really important principle when it comes to pain. Often pain focuses, we get focused on the pain and we focus on where it hurts, but where it hurts is simply a symptom. It's not necessarily where the problem is at. Often the problem is elsewhere. And so if we focus on the symptoms, we're not going to get the best results. We have to broaden our search, which is why I want to do a full body assessment to really get a better picture of what's going on in the body so I can address other areas too. So I hope that was helpful.